Hey guys, real quick, we're going to segue into the summary here in a second, but I did have a community announcement. GCX, the Gamer Community Expo, which is run by fantastic people like Dr. Lupo, Sam Lupo, his wife, Professor Broman, Gathalion, Darkness 429. Some really, really fantastic people have been for years getting together to raise money for St. Jude Children's Hospital. I have been lucky enough to be included in their charity marathon for the last 3 years. This is my third year, and the first year that I'm not going to be a ringer getting called in inside of a 24-hour period because somebody had to bail. My charity block is from midnight Eastern Standard Time next Sunday, the 14th, the night of the 14th, midnight Eastern Standard Time into the 15th, Monday morning for 4 hours. I will be live from midnight to 4 a.m. Sunday into Monday morning. I would love it if you guys would come and hang out. I will have more details for you in the coming days, I promise you, but if you could keep that in the back of your mind, you don't have to donate anything, but I would love to just have some bodies hanging out. We are going to be playing Dark and Darker, and I will have some very, very cool giveaways for those of you that want to participate and donate even $1. Okay, thank you guys so much, and on to the video. Hey, what's up guys? Good morning. My name is Onepeg. It is 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and this video will serve as the summary for the dev Q&A that I did last night with Terry and SDF, the heads of Iron Mace Games, in regard to all things that have been going on this season and then future stuff. As a reminder, as soon as this video is live, I will be live over at twitch.tv/onepeg, so come by and say hi if you feel like saying hi. Okay, so we started off by me asking them how they thought the season was going so far. If it had met expectations, if it had exceeded them. I even had a note where yesterday around, I don't know, 10, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, there was about 41,000 players in the dungeon. Terry said that he felt as though this season was like an 8 out of 10. There's some bugs and some features that they wanted to have added during the course of this season. Once that's in, he said that he figured this would feel like a 9 out of 10. I then asked about current class rundowns. Is there any class in the game that they feel like is most in line or most balanced, etc., with how they envision the classes are supposed to be played? In the past, they have talked about how there's a bit of a civil war back and forth between Terry's side of things, where he feels like the game should be a little bit more slowly paced and a little bit more spongy, if you will, a little bit longer time to kill, and SDF's side, where he wants it to be a little bit more punishing and have the time to kill be a bit shorter and less forgiving. He doesn't like systems like GBMM, for instance. The back and forth seems to shift over time, where Terry kind of gets a leg up to try and experiment a little bit, and then SDF kind of gets his leg up and tries to do a little bit more experimenting on his end. So he said that balance is tricky, and like this little civil war back and forth between opinions on how the game should be built and adjusted kind of shifts over time. And there was even a little bit of joking about how the current iteration of the game and how it's being played is a little bit more on Terry's shoulders. I even made a joke that if this goes awry, it's kind of all his fault, but that's not really true. It's just more that they've shifted and allowed the game to be a little bit more slowly paced, which I honestly think has been a good change. SDF chimed in and said that he felt as though most of the classes, all of the classes in the game, really are pretty in line with what they've envisioned those classes to be and how they're supposed to be played. So that's pretty good. For future stuff, for those of you unaware, the lobby, the matchmaking lobby where you can run around and inspect other people, is going away. We've known that to be true for a while now. They're just trying to make sure that the matchmaking system works. So we're not exactly sure how much time that's going to take. It is supposed to be in this season. Hopefully they end up making their deadline. I think we all can agree that the inspecting thing isn't really something that we really want anymore. It tends to detract from people's ability to play the game in a more natural way, and I think that removing it is really the best option. I even went so far as to ask in the interim if they could remove the ability to inspect each other, and what they said was, it's possible, but it would actually slow down the process to get the new matchmaking system in the game. So rather than detract from the person or people that are working on this system and have them just change that in the interim, it would actually slow down the end result. So for that reason, I guess we'll just have to wait a little bit longer. Now on to the Druid. Movement mechanic wise, they said that the Druid is intended. It's supposed to be built the way that it's built. The movement mechanics that Druid has are and were intentional. Terry did concede though that the amount of movement capability that the Druid has might be a little bit too excessive, and they may need to rope that in a little bit, but they're trying their best not to need that, in hopes that the player base will be able to adjust to the movement mechanics that the Druid has and be able to, like, I guess, beat them through just gameplay. That being said, there are 3 additional forms that are being added. We kind of already knew about the penguin and turtle forms, but they're also adding a gorilla. However, those 3 forms will be taking a back seat to the priority item, which is the Sorcerer. For differences between the Wizard and the Sorcerer, Wizards are supposed to be very learned. They're people that like went to clown college and they know how to do all of the tricks. In the case of Sorcerers, they're like people that don't really know a whole heck of a lot about magic, but they're very, very strong with magic. And the way that the Sorcerer is supposed to work is because they have this innate ability, this natural affinity toward the elements and elemental magic, they will not need a spellcasting focus in order to be able to cast spells. They'll be able to put one spell, different spells in each hand, and then be able to control them based on which hand you end up using. Unknown whether or not there's going to be like a spell wheel, or if you will have to choose those spells to start, or however that's going to work. We don't really know. But that's kind of the idea behind what Sorcerer is. There is also the idea of being able to like combine the spells that you have in either hand for like a synergistic effect. However, there was a lot of laughing about this because the more ideas that we tend to put into SDF's head, Terry joked, the longer it will take for Sorcerer to end up being brought to the forefront for us to be able to play it. Now, I don't know how that's going to affect Wizard, and I think it was too early to be able to have that conversation piece with these guys about how that's going to work. This barehanded mechanic, though, that they are revamping for the purpose of making Sorcerer is going to tie into the Monk. So the Monk being what would come after the Sorcerer is done, but this barehanded rework will likely end up tying directly into the Monk and give us a lot more barehanded like combat options once this piece, I guess, is done. Okay, then the next big one is status of the Ruins map. So there used to be a Ruins map. The Ruins used to feed into the Crypt, which fed into Inferno. The Ruins of the Forgotten Castle is why it's named that. The Ruins was an outdoor map, had very long sight lines. A lot of the OGs obviously remember this. New players were unfortunately unable to check this out. For next season, they are looking at bringing Ruins back with a rework. It's not going to be this 3-level system like it had been in the past, where Ruins feeds into Crypts, which feeds into Inferno. What they're instead looking at doing is making Ruins its own standalone map, very similar to how Goblin Cave works, and they're looking at adding 2 bosses to the map for people to go and fight, which is kind of huge news. This also means that the idea of this underwater map or underwater temple is going to be pushed back, it seems, for the map after this one. So Ruins, for the time being, will be the thing that ends up showing up, I guess, for next season, hopefully with a couple of new bosses on it. Now on to Arena. They didn't have a lot of elaboration here. It seems as though SDF is keeping this one pretty close to the vest. However, we know that Arena is now being worked on or actively worked on. SDF is championing this one himself. They are taking a very focused, very concerted effort, at least SDF is, on this specifically. And it seems like SDF is splitting his time between the development of the Sorcerer and pushing for Arena very hard. So in terms of priority items in the very near future, it seems like the matchmaking is kind of like priority 1, and then Arena is priority 2, with Sorcerer close behind. Unfortunately for Arena, that's pretty much all I have informationally. They haven't elaborated on how it's going to work, team sizes, or anything of the like. What they did say, though, is that in terms of PvP and PvP balance, Arena will be a very good way to determine what needs tweaking on the PvP balance side, and it will be a good way for us to like continuously test this stuff in the meat grinder to see what works and what needs help. On the matchmaking side, just to reiterate this, the idea is that they're going to modify the lobby into, the matchmaking system that we all want, where there's no inspect and there is no lobby, no meeting place, but they're going to make the lobby, what is the lobby now, more of a gathering hall. What they want to do is turn this into several social spaces. So you're going to have like your own room, or possibly like a guild hall as well, with the ability to have like personal space and then like a more social space for people to be able to like come and visit, if you want to think about it that way. And then obviously there's going to be a larger meeting area, which would be like the tavern. In the case of things that have been talked about in the past, more future-facing stuff, but had been mentioned in the past, and relatively recent past, let's say the last year or so, I asked about additional weapons that are similar to how the functionality of the Lantern Shield works, like a parrying dagger or a sword breaker, things that have more counter mechanics, because I think that those are really good for skill expression in players. He mentioned mentioned that they are thinking about it. They have all of these medieval weapons that they want to include in the game, but they aren't coming soon. What is coming soon, though, is wands. So a year ago, they had wanted to have wands implemented. The way that wands are going to work is they're going to include a random spell of some kind in them, which will make wands have a wide variety of values. It's going to have random magics. They're going to have random numbers of charges, minimum stats to be able to wield them. You'll have to have a certain amount of knowledge in order to be able to hold them in your hand and use them. Pretty cool, though, to be able to generate some build diversity, but not necessarily create something game-breaking. Imagine you have the ability for, like, a cleric, for instance, to be able to hold a wand. Kind of cool. He also mentioned that the charges will need the ability to like recharge them somehow. Not sure exactly how that's going to work, but it is a cool new element that somebody like, say, a wizard, for instance, will be able to benefit from. Also, about a year ago was the mention of gems and socketing, and strangely enough, it seems as though just before the weekend hit, these guys were at lunch talking about it. He said it's being worked on. SDF said, "Don't worry, baby birds." It's something that they're trying to get in by the end of this season, actually, which would be an interesting like surprise drop if possible. But Terry thinks that they might have eyes that are like bigger than their stomachs, so to speak, and might not actually get in. So hopefully by the end of this season, if not next. I also made mention of the progress of the skills tree or talent tree. It's something that they are putting off for now, is kind of how they ended up putting it. They know that it's something that they want to have built, but they want to build it in a way that's going to be meaningful and is going to make sense as the game is developed. So for now, it seems as though the talent tree is getting pushed off a little bit, perhaps sometime next season, but it will not be this one. For the inventory system, we know that they recently revamped like the inventory system's back end. So my question to them was, will we be able to see things like quivers and backpacks now? They said that there's still too many back-end bugs. The rebuild of the inventory system's back end is not complete yet. They've noticed that there's some bugs, errors, issues with people like dragging and dropping certain items into their backpacks, or trying to put them on their person, like equipping items and stuff. Sometimes that drag and drop mechanic fails. There's some other bugs in the back end. So they're not confident and comfortable with implementing quivers or backpack expansions yet, but it's coming. They just have to work out the kinks. I had mentioned that we recently saw, and if you hadn't seen, there's a lot of Tarkov streamers, especially that have been given sponsorship opportunities to play Dark and Darker for a handful of hours, certain days of the week, depending on who got the sponsorship days and when. I asked them how they felt like the marketing push went. They said that it was a learning experience. They're unsure if it's working or not. They like that they saw a lot of new attention, a lot of fresh eyeballs on the game. In terms of it equating to marketing success, they're unsure. That's really falling into more of Soma's department. I then asked if we would see like a Twitch Drops or a Twitch Rivals event at some point in the near future. They said that this is something that they want to do, but they're unsure on how to personally do it. This is why they ended up hiring a guy like Soma, who has experience doing working with Twitch and would know the ways around the Twitch Drops events. But they said that they would love to see this happen. I ended up joking with Soma as part of the podcast that he needs to get this thing done in the next month or two, and he just kind of like smiled and nodded. So hopefully we'll end up seeing something like that soon. It would be pretty fun. I then asked about Froststone ore crafts, and they said that those Froststone ore crafts are coming. So we have a dagger that has already been teased from data mining, and we also have this ghost blade, which I also believe would possibly be part of the Froststone ore stuff. Maybe not. What it seemed like when they were talking about it, though, is that the Froststone stuff, they were trying to make it so that it was at least on par with the value expectations of the player base, meaning the value that they're putting on the ore right now. If you go and look at the market, it was like 1,300 to 1,800 gold per ore. They're not sure if they're going to be able to generate something that's going to give value to the ore to the extent that the player base is stressing it, because it's all speculative. But they do believe that they're going to have some pretty good pieces being made from it. Speaking of Froststone ore, the Wyvern fight. I made mention that, hey, the Wyvern fight isn't really working out for the player base because of this whole, like, needing 4 people to be able to trigger the fight thing. They agreed. It's being changed. In the next major hotfix, we should see a modification to the Wyvern fight that will allow people to summon it without needing a 4-man party. I don't know if that means that we're going to be able to do it with 3, or if you're going to need a 3-man, but what we do know is that you don't need 4. That's what they were told, or that's what we were told. So hopefully we'll be able to get in there and experience the content with our own groups. Now, I did try to broach on PvP balance, specifically with the Bard Cleric combo that seems to be dominating the meta right now. We know that they're going to, or at least they've talked about, SDF joked about, saying that they realize that the Cleric right now is a little bit overtuned. It's going to get roped in. Now, that was the extent of the PvP balance conversation. SDF isn't really all that concerned about balance at the moment. They realize that gamers want their gameplay when it comes to, the competitive side of the game to be as balanced as possible. We all want that. What he's hoping is that once the arena is placed in the game, once we get it in the game, we'll be able to focus a lot more heavily on PvP balance to be able to see like how those balance points work and what needs modifying. So that's kind of the priority at the moment. There's going to be some tweaks obviously in between, but the main focus is on getting arena into the game so that they can really focus on balance after that. Okay, and then there was some like quality of life kind of things and suggestions from the community that I wanted to run by them and see what they thought. The first question was, why do skeletons bleed? And they said, because why not? It became like an office meme and it's just going to stay that way. I asked about having VoIP enabled by default, and they gave me the most honest answer I think I've ever heard from a dev. The VoIP system is provided by a third-party vendor, and the reason why it's not on by default is because the VoIP system is expensive. So they naturally had it turned off by default in order to save cost. Then I asked about underutilized perks and skills and underutilized spells like Warlock's Dark Beam, Dark Offering, Lore Mastery for the Bard, Arcane Feedback for the Wizard, Holy Water for Cleric, Campfire Mastery, just for example. They said that it's a lower priority, but SDF was nodding as I was reading this stuff off and said that it was being worked on to make some changes so that those perks are a little bit more widely used. I also asked about ideas for build variants. For instance, Bard, who is incredibly strong, only really has one viable form of gameplay. So I asked if there was like build variances being looked at for things like a fighter that wanted to be like more tanky and crowd controlling, or a Bard that wanted to be more about like crowd control and not necessarily about offensive capability. And they said that arena will kind of be the focal point for this and build variants. There was the mention about Crystal Sword being in rough shape. For those of you that haven't played with a Crystal Sword, the reason why you don't play with a Crystal Sword or ever see one is because Crystal Sword is kind of butt cheeks at the moment. There was a community suggestion on Reddit where if you hit with it, it could possibly do like a bit of a recharge of people's spell counts. SDF actually super liked that idea and said that might be something there. But he also suggested that with the Crystal Sword, there's the option of having some new animations or some different swing tech, etc., that you could end up focusing into instead with the Crystal Sword. They also mentioned that the craftable sword that is coming is supposedly going to be pretty strong. So there might be some hope there. I also asked about the ability to have a toggle crouch option in the keybinds. There's some people on Reddit that mentioned that their hands get pretty tired just constantly holding down the control key trying to sneak. They said that it's something that they can look at. They finally have like a little bit of bandwidth to be able to get a dev assigned to doing like key customization, so maybe that's possible in the future. I asked about the potential for an auto sort feature, and they said inventory refactoring, the inventory refactoring that they've been doing, is what's holding that back. So same vein as the quiver and backpack. I asked about community pooled goal events, like collect a couple 100,000 bandages for a thing, or 20,000 wardweed, or something along those lines. They said that that's a good idea, but then they countered by saying that they are looking at adding religions to the game, faction systems, at some point in the next like 6 months. So that's a thing. That's something. That's something. Don't know exactly how that's going to work, but a faction system would be pretty sweet. I then asked about the ability to have like potions, bandages, the campfire, the starting gear. Instead of having to go to the Squire and add it to your character by hand for new players, they may not know really like how to do this or that it exists even. But if you could have that on your character by default at character creation, they said that they would love to do this, but they need more people to work on these things. So hopefully, again, in the near future, we will see this as a quality of life improvement. Segueing from that, we talked about the new player experience. And then I mentioned, like, what if you guys had some new player guides on your own YouTube channel and then leveraged content creators that are kind of known for this kind of stuff, like myself or Ryan 6 Days a Week, etc. They could contribute to this and generate some YouTube content for them that they publish on their own YouTube channel and then could embed in the game. And this, again, is something that they would love to be able to do, but they need more people to be able to work on this stuff. So hopefully we'll be able to see some like new player onboarding stuff in game in the near future. There was also a suggestion from the community to give the Spellbook a melee swing. SDF was laughing in the background as I was asking about this, and he said he already has animations built for this and he wants to add it, but they don't know when they would do it. I said, you know, you could jab somebody in the face with the book binding, or just, you know, hold the book like a bat and clap somebody across the face with it. They had a good laugh about it and said that this is something that they want to add. I also asked about item set pieces and set perks. They said that this is something that they want, inspired obviously from Diablo 1 and 2. He said not the other Diablos, though, was like kind of a pretty funny joke. They said that it's a super cool idea that they've wanted to do for a long time, but they want to build on the greater, wider experience of the game as opposed to focusing on those types of things at this point in time, but they want to come back to it and add it later. I then asked about an opportunity to be able to gain or obtain previous season rewards, you know, skins, things that you were able to earn in the past. Will that be something that people would be able to get, say, from the store later on? They said no. The current thinking is no. They believe that the things that you're achieving from those seasons are things that should stay with those seasons and stay with the people that achieved them. Legacy stuff. In the same vein of the conversation that had to do with like legacy items from prior seasons, there was also this talk about skins, because that's typically what people are talking about, the ability to get skins for their stuff. There were skins from last season, for instance, that were unlockable via a quest. One of them gave +1 weapon damage in exchange for a negative. And all of the skins are trying to, at the very least, be a bit balanced. Like the lizard skin has a smaller head hitbox in exchange for additional armor, but you can't wear a helmet, right? There's like these trades. Some of them still need a little bit of tweaking. Like the lichen skin, I still don't think is in a good enough place to warrant like running it. But there was the talk of removing stats from the skins so that people didn't feel like they were missing out on anything other than cosmetics. The issue with that is they would have to remove like the lizard skin or the lichen skin, because the hitboxes for like the head on the lizard skin, for instance, is smaller than other models, which becomes a problem. That also means that they wouldn't be able to add the dwarf to the game, because then that would be the best possible skin that you could run based on how much smaller, even though it's stout, it's a much smaller character model, right? Much shorter, much harder box to hit. So they're not going to be able to do that. They want to make sure that the stat allocation stuff, when you use these skins, fits. They refer to it as like pay to lose, is kind of the tongue-in-cheek joke with it. So we should at least see a dwarf skin coming. That's kind of the good news. The bad news is, for people that wanted them, the legacy stuff is just not going to be something that's going to show up in the store anytime soon. Then there was a question about the movement tech, bunny hopping, the ability for spellcasters to be able to jump in the air, wind up a spell, and then when they land, jump again, to be able to maintain momentum while they're like winding up a spell to fire at people. It's a good bit of tech. This works also with rangers that are winding up bows. It's a good bit of tech to be able to maintain momentum. They said that this wasn't intended originally, but they don't see a problem with it in the game right now, so they think they're going to leave it as is. A while ago, there was mention of a scaling crypts dungeon for Inferno specifically with the different bosses, and I asked about if the intention was to still have them scale based on party size. They said no. It is not a priority item right now. It's not something that they're looking at doing in the near future, and it will likely not be something that they look at doing later on down the line. If they did, it would be something that they would have to like start over on and try to make work. I personally think that they don't need to. There's plenty of video guides and tutorial information out there where it's difficult, but the ability to beat them exists. I then asked about Warlock Evil Eye, of course. They said that that's not going to be soon. It was originally hacked in and was not operating how it was intended to do. The skill, it's not the skill that they want to implement. What they did do with this is the idea for people to be able to like play in the game as a monster, because the way that Evil Eye worked is you generated a skullbat and then your camera was basically inside of the skullbat. You became a skullbat. What they want to do is build on that idea so that people could play as monsters, load in kind of like a monster-esque scav run, if you will, and play as random monsters in the dungeon to be able to, you know, have an extra element to it. Pretty cool. So it appears the evil eye has died, so the rest of us may live as monsters in the dungeon. There was the question of a loot goblin, like a random loot goblin showing up in the dungeon. They mentioned that that's coming way later, but what they also mentioned was the inclusion of like the possibility of, hopefully in the near future even, bosses that would randomly appear in the dungeon, kind of like the butcher showing up in Diablo 4, just randomly as you're progressing through. This would be really, really cool, I think. I asked about the ability to buy gold bags in bulk so that you didn't have to buy them in like little single bits every time. They said that while it looks simple on the surface, it's actually a little bit more difficult than it appears. It's kind of a legacy thing with old code that they would have to like revamp a little bit and make work. And they're not sure if it's going to be anytime soon. There was then the piece about account-wide quest completion. So right now, if you want to do quests, you have to do every quest from start to finish on every character that you create. They said that this is a pain point. It's actually a high priority item. The devs don't like it. A lot of the players don't like it. But there is the risk of all of these side effects, which, like, if you unlock like a craft, for instance, then all of a sudden all 9 of your characters would have access to that craft. They would all either need to be on a global cooldown, or the other suggestion was, at least for the interim while they're trying to figure out balance for this, affinity. So the Squire, the ability to be able to put on better like starting gear, is kind of a huge sticking point for a lot of people. No one wants to play a new class if they have like really garbage stuff. It's all of the affinity unlocks for the Squire to be able to outfit you with better whites and stuff so that you can wear those into the dungeon and feel a little bit stronger. That's a huge difference between, you know, starting gray items and white gear that has 2 or 3 stat points on them. They said that the affinity idea is something that they could do. Now, I wasn't trying to make that suggestion because I was trying to speak for everyone. I double checked with everyone that was in chat, and it seemed like chat was unanimously scrolling like, yes, that would be huge. So I think that that's really the sticking point, and they said in the interim they can make that piece happen pretty shortly. So hopefully we would be able to see like an account-wide affinity unlock thing. They just have to make sure that it's not going to cause issues with if you did do quests on other characters, how that's going to end up on like affecting the Squire affinity. Because if you start getting like greens and blues in the Squire, it's going to be a problem, right? Okay, and last but not least was a question about an in-raid quest log, the ability to see the quest that you have, like, you know, on an inventory tab or something like that. They said that that is a priority item for them as well. They are going to continue iterating on it. Currently, the quest system by like point version internally is in like what they called 0.1. The next iteration of this quest log system is going to be 0.2. So hopefully we'll be able to see something functional inside of a match that is logging our progress for us. That would be really, really huge. Okay, so that's everything that I have for you guys. I wish I had some visual aids or something along those lines, but unfortunately we didn't have any media. I kind of just wanted to make this as a quick and dirty summary of the 2-hour talk that we had. Hopefully you guys ended up enjoying it, found it informational. If there is anything that you guys feel like I could be doing better on the interview side, please leave a comment and let me know how I could improve upon the interviewing that I'm doing. I'm trying to find a balance between cutting Terry off because he has told me multiple times that he is long-winded and he likes to ramble, and letting him speak. And it's not always the easiest thing in the world to do. But if there is like better questions that you think that I should be asking, or if there's a better format or how I could be doing this in a better way, I'm always open to suggestion. I'm trying to improve upon this as much as I possibly can and become, you know, one of the better interviewers when it comes to devs and stuff. So I'd like to be able to continue doing this, not just for Iron Mace, but for as many people as that would let me. So yeah, suggestions always welcome. Anyway, thank you guys so much for coming and checking out the video. I really, really do appreciate it. If you would consider subbing the channel, that would be amazing. Maybe even hit the bell, maybe leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think. Otherwise, you can come and check me out over at twitch.tv/Onepeg, where I will be live as soon as this video is live. I'm live every day around 6 a.m., 5:30 a.m. We like to be early. If neither of those things are for you, then I suppose I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you guys so much for lending me your eyeballs. We'll see you real soon, okay? Peace.